everyone, this is Dr. Nisha Nujumudeen. The topic of discussion for the day is inclusive growth and also another topic called as intra-generational and intergenerational equity. So now this is indeed a very broad topic of discussion. The keyword inclusive growth. Very often you can see this particular term used in many statements. At the same time, from the UPSC Mains examination point of view, multiple times this particular keyword inclusive growth and the related perspective have come directly for the examination. So let's have a look into what is it. And now before starting that, since 2017, the questions based on what is inclusive growth, has India been able to achieve or let's say progress towards it? That is one type of question. The next question is based on inclusive growth and sustainability. And now, with regard to intra and intergenerational equity, this is a topic associated with inclusive growth. This was a previous year mains question. And the question goes like this. Explain the intra and intergenerational issues of equity. And now, how does it contribute in inclusiveness and sustainability? So now, let's have a quick look into what are each of these in detail. Having said that, inclusive growth in simple terms, including everything, or let's say, making sure that every single perspective is taken into consideration. We say inclusive of one particular factor means what? Including that factor. We are not eliminating, discriminating or avoiding anything. Rather, everything is taken into consideration. That is called as inclusiveness. So now, having said that, in economics, inclusive growth refers to a kind of growth, which is economic growth in simple terms, which leads to including every section of society, regardless of age, caste, creed, color, sex, gender, etc. This inclusive growth means having or let's say providing access or basic essential services to everybody, irrespective of any parameters. And thus, inclusive growth is economic growth, which leads to what? Creation or generation of more employment opportunities. Automatically, it leads to what? It leads to generation of income. And now, it helps in driving the so-called economic growth of our country. Today, our country, India, requires not just development. It is sustainable development, which means long-term development. At the same time, we are looking forward for an inclusive development. That means including every nook and corner of our country, India's population. Whether you belong to any category, rural area, remote areas or vulnerable sections of society, everybody will be included in all the essential socio-economic development of the country. So now that is called as inclusive growth in simple terms. Now, having said that, this inclusive growth is nothing but giving equal opportunities for everybody. Nobody is eliminated. Nobody is discriminated. So that, for example, if one particular scheme is released by the government, making sure that everybody is having access to it, who are the targeted beneficiaries. There is no discrimination as to only one particular area or one particular region will get what? The benefits of it. So it's a kind of inclusion of everybody. And now, inclusive growth focuses on equal opportunity or let's say equality, and it is also a way of empowering the people in order to attain certain set of objectives and making sure that they are included in that. The opposite of inclusive growth is exclusive growth. What is excluding? Avoiding something. So now when we focus on one segment of the population, for example, if we are focusing only on the rich or the top segment of the population, that is called as exclusive growth, whereas the poor segment is completely avoided and vice versa. So that is called as exclusive growth, right? But including all together everybody under one single umbrella and giving equal access or equal opportunities and empowering them, that comes under what? Inclusive growth. And this inclusive growth is very important for the so-called economic growth for our country, India. Now, this inclusive growth also consists or it focuses on environmental friendly growth, which means that apart from making sure that everybody in our country is having access to economic and social indicators or development perspective, environmental factors are also to be taken into consideration. environmental degradation, like loss of depletion of resources, or let's say pollution, the issues of deforestation. All these things are causing too much of issues, right? And certain parts of our country, India, certain cities or certain states are highly affected with environmental damage or issues. So now putting forward measures to rectify it and making sure that every person in our country, India, or let's say every sections of the society or people is having access to all sorts of benefits, even on an eco-friendly manner or environmental friendly manner, also comes under what? Inclusive growth. Having said that, inclusiveness also deals with environmental friendly growth. Now, there are certain elements of inclusive growth. One is financial inclusion. This is a very important topic of discussion. Multiple times questions pertaining to the keyword financial inclusion has come. For example, one of the associated schemes of financial inclusion is Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. The Jan Aadhaar Mobile Trinity. That is, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana is actually a flagship program of Government of India. It is a financial inclusion program. In simple terms, banking the unbanked. It is called as banking the unbanked. All the rural population of our country, India, will now open a bank account through this particular Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, so that slowly and gradually they are getting access to how to use a bank account, how to use a mobile phone, how to have a digital literacy, financial literacy, etc. So this is a part of financial inclusion. So now, having said that, this topic exclusively is also important for the mains examination perspective because it was a PYQ. Okay. Having said that, financial inclusion means making sure that all the financial services are equally accessible or available to every section, especially to the vulnerable sections or groups of the country or society. That's called as financial inclusion. One of the elements of the so-called inclusive growth is what? Financial inclusion. And other element is skill development. Making sure that every single sections of a society, especially the vulnerable group, are having adequate training and skill development. Skilling, upskilling and reskilling the people. Because we all know that in our country, India, majority of population belongs to the agriculture sector. At least near about 50% today, right? And now most of them are unskilled or semi-skilled. So now giving adequate skilling is also important for what? Getting proper employment opportunity. Thereby creating what? Income, at the end of the day contributing to GDP per capita. So that is one thing. And now, apart from that, if you see, we have a huge DD, that is demographic dividend. Demographic dividend means the total number of young working population. That is, for example, in a country, India, how many young working population who are in the working age is there? 15 to 45, for example. It's not about the older population. We consider only the young working population under demographic dividend. India is a country that is high in the DD or demographic dividend. Among the Indian state, if you see, which part of India do you think has a higher demographic dividend? The north part of India has a higher demographic dividend compared to what? The south part of India. Take care. So now, having said that, lot of skill development has to be given to train that young population so that they produce output at the expected level. The next element of inclusive growth is technological advancements. We are in the so-called Industrial Revolution 4.0, right? So having technological advancements in every field, right from agriculture to education to industry, it's very important. And this must be accessible to everybody, not just certain sections of the society. The next one is economic growth and social development. See, if India wants to become the US $5 trillion economy by 2025, or at least by 2027, then it is very important to make sure that India is focusing on growth which is inclusive in nature. Otherwise, it becomes a question mark. And thus, social development by focusing on various social factors like giving adequate importance to better medical facilities, quality education. All these are very, very important. And this will enable to attain something called as inclusive growth. Having said that, there are certain reasons which is very, very important for you to know in the context of why is India not able, or let's say what are the factors preventing India from attaining inclusive growth. One is the levels of poverty that has to be reduced drastically. Next is the issue of unemployment and the labor force participation between male and female. That also has to be rectified. The next important reason is regional disparity. That is the most important issue which is preventing our India from attaining inclusive growth. This has to be solved. So slowly and gradually what happened? Inclusive growth can be attained. Having said that, one of the measure to attain inclusive growth is an index is there called as Inclusive Development Index. This index was put forward by World Economic Forum. Okay. According to this particular index, it is said that out of 74 emerging economies, you know what is the rank of India? It was 62. What is the meaning of this? India is not doing great. In what? The inclusive growth perspective, right? And thus, according to the Inclusive Development Index, it was said that India is one of the least inclusive country among the G20 countries, which means a lot more have to be done. By whom? By a country, India, right? Now, this particular index called as Inclusive Development Index, it is measured based on 3 parameters. There are 3 parameters or indicators to measure what? Inclusive Development Index. One is development, growth and development. Second is inclusion. Third is what? Intergenerational equity and sustainability. Based on this only, the Inclusive Development Index is measured. Having said that, did you note something? Intergenerational? From this particular topic only, for the mains examination in 2022-21, a question called as explain the issues of inter and intra-generational equity to achieve sustainability and inclusivity was asked. Is it clear? Sorry, inclusiveness was asked. Now, having said that, let's have a look into what is intra and intergenerational equity. In simple terms, inter means what? Between two. For example, interstate means 2 states. Trade between 2 different states is called as interstate trade. For example, trade between Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, or trade between Kerala and Tamil Nadu. You understand? So 2 states are involving. For example, within the state of Telangana or within the state of Kerala itself, when you start doing transactions or trade among the various districts, that is called as intra. So intra means within, inter means 2 different parties are involved. Now, similarly, intra and intergenerational equity as a concept in simple terms means that intra-generational equity talks about the present generation, whereas intergenerational equity talks about the future generations. In simple terms, how the resources are utilized, how the opportunities are utilized by the present generation. That is what intra-generational equity deals with. So basically, intra-generational equity deals with allocation of resources or utilization of available natural resources and creating of economic opportunities by the present generation. So it is focused on meeting the requirements of the present generations or everybody in the society, regardless or let's say irrespective of age, gender, caste, creed, etc. Now, when we start using resources in the present generation, it is always important to keep in mind the upcoming generation. For example, previously our ancestors, they never took care of what? The non-renewable source of energy, which is petrol. We call petrol as non-renewable source today, right? Because once upon a time, India was abundant in petrol or petroleum related products. Today, because of over-exploitation, without even preserving it for the future generation, we were exploiting it. Today, what happens? We depend upon other countries to import it, right? So if you keep on exhausting the resources and not saving for future generation, then it becomes difficult. The concept of sustainable development, that doesn't happen. What is sustainable development? Using resources for the present generation and also saving or preserving it for the use by the future generation. Whatever we use, we should use it in such a way that our children, our grandchildren and their children, that is great grandchildren of us, will also have access to those resources. That is the concept. Did you understand? Now, having said that, intergenerational equity is defined as the allocation of resources or the use of resources and also economic opportunities that are being available for the future generation. If the present generations are using resources or creating opportunities in such a way, then the future generations will benefit out of it, right? That is called as intergenerational equity in simple terms. So basically, intra-generational is focusing on the needs of present generation, whether that is met or not, where everybody is included. Whereas intergeneration is focusing on what? The future generations' needs, rights or requirements in the context of resource or opportunities. They are not suffering. And now compared to present generation, like how the present generation is having access to resources and opportunity, the future generations will also need to have such kind of access. For that, what we should do, the present generation people should save and conserve it or create opportunities. Is it clear? This is the point of differences. Now, what you should write for your mains answer writing from this particular topic is, you can write what is intra and intergenerational equity. After that, the issues associated with intra and intergenerational equity for attaining inclusiveness or inclusive growth and sustainability is, one is the issue of environmental perspective. You can talk about the environmental degradation perspective. Then you can talk about, the lack of proper social availability of resources. You can actually talk about those perspectives as well. Okay. Having said that, this is a very important topic of discussion. So make sure that you go through this properly. So I hope it is very clear to all of you. Whatever doubts, whatever queries you have, please don't forget to put it down in the comment box. I will revert back to you. And now, whatever topics you want to do for the upcoming class also, feel free to put it down. I hope you enjoyed this session. Stay tuned for more such topics. Thank you and Jai Hind.